Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast.
Very warm welcome to another special CDMO live version of the PharmaSource podcast. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Tom Wilson, who's the VP of Global Contract Manufacturing at Pfizer CentreOne. Really delighted to have Tom here today to give us the benefit of some of his experiences and have a chat on the PharmaSource podcast. So, Tom, a very warm welcome.
Thanks, Chris. I'm delighted to be here as well. Looking forward to our conversation.
First question, we would just ask for you to give a short introduction to you and to the business, and maybe to cover something that makes you unique for customers. But I'm also, very mindful that you've had a really interesting career over recent years. So keen to hear a bit more about you. So please just give us an introduction.
That'll be fun. I gotta say, I very much have enjoyed my career. It's if I had to chart a career path, I don't think I could have come up with this one in any way, shape, or form. I was an officer in the United States Air Force out of university, so I spent 10 years in the Air Force. And when I left the Air Force, I used a program back in the late 80s called What Color's Your Parachute? And it was a series of tools and tests to try and figure out what you were called, what your calling was. Where would you find the best career opportunity? And lo and behold, it pointed me towards pharmaceutical manufacturing. It was either that or be a farmer, right? And I'm just not the farmer type. So I had the opportunity to join Airst Laboratories in upstate New York as a frontline supervisor. The beauty of Airst was it was one of the large multi-purpose plants still in the United States at that time. So I had a chance to work in multiple technologies. So I worked in solid oral dose, I worked in sterile injectables, I worked in liquid creams and ointments, I worked in infant nutritionals. I also got to support various business types. I got to work with innovative pharma, but I also got to work with generics. I got to work with consumer healthcare, got to work with CPG, hospital businesses, et cetera. So it was a great starting point. So I spent a number of years there. I guess 10 years there, working my way through that and also working my way up the ladder, right? So moving from supervisor to superintendent to manager to senior manager. And from there, I had an opportunity to move where at the time I thought I was moving to corporate headquarters in Philadelphia. I got to Philadelphia and ended up deployed over to Singapore to help start up a Pfizer plant in Singapore. So that was the first chance I had to really work as on an international basis. I had done quite a bit of work prior to that in Ireland, but really to get a new plant up and running, brand new brick and mortar operation with technologies that I not only understood, but I was an SME in. Got that up and running, came back to the States, worked in a strategy role. And then moved over to consumer healthcare. And in consumer healthcare, I was asked to move what was going to become the external supply organization, so the virtual plant, to move it from a procurement model where you cut a PO and just hope like crazy that the batches show up on time, to an engagement model where you're running S&OP with the suppliers. You're really collaborating with the suppliers. You're building a relationship with the suppliers. I was really blessed because my bosses at the time knew some really critical players in the CDMO external supply industry. So I had a chance to work with Jim Ryder at Johnson & Johnson. I had a chance to work with Pete Stevenson at Pharmacia. And goodness, they're the godfathers of external supply. They're the godfathers of creating a virtual plant. So we built our virtual plant based on that model. Then we were acquired by Pfizer. In Pfizer, I had a chance to work on a number of things, more and more in the CDMO space. So working in terms of various strategies, but also working in India, in Bangalore and Hyderabad, on Pfizer's hospital business operation to try and find better ways to bring more medicines to patients in an affordable way. And then back to the States to work on, some more Pfizer strategies. But then I got asked to look into this new construct called Pfizer CentreOne. So it wasn't that new, to be honest with you. So Pfizer CentreOne was actually the outgrowth of Pfizer CentreSource, as well as Hospira one-to-ones. They were brought together to create Pfizer CentreOne. We had a very large consulting firm offer, $1 million program to us to do a naming study. Instead, a couple of us went out downtown in New York, and in an hour we came up with Pfizer CentreOne. CentreSource, one-to-one, CentreOne, just seems to work. But it's been a great ride. So I started on the manufacturing side of CentreOne, and then when Pfizer did Organizing for Growth in 2018, I moved to the commercial side, and boy, it's been a great ride. It's one thing to love manufacturing, but then to have the opportunity to sell what you love, which is what we do in CentreOne. We sell our manufacturing. I'm selling something that is just near and dear to the very core of my professional being, right? And CentreOne brings a lot to the table, right? So our tagline is we're altogether different, and we think we are. Right. So to begin with, we're an integrated CDMO. We are not a pure play CDMO, right? There are plenty of pure play CDMOs. They're great, and I like to think we're great too. So CentreOne is an integrated CDMO. What does that actually mean? It means we don't actually own our own plants. We don't actually own our own pharmaceutical development centers. What we do is we leverage Pfizer's existing install. Right. So when we bring a client partner on board, they get access to Pfizer's, the same manufacturing work centers that Pfizer uses for its products, the same pharmaceutical development centers that Pfizer uses for its products, the same scientists, the same operators, the same analysts. What that does is it unlocks the science of Pfizer for the partner. And we have very robust ways of controlling intellectual property, make sure we're protecting our clients' intellectual property, as well as protecting Pfizer's intellectual property, but making sure that we bring it through, right? And then the other advantage, and again, they're more and more, as I talk to my friends and peers in the industry, the patient centricity that we have at Pfizer, bringing that same patient centricity to our client partners, right? It's when we start a conversation with a client, they're usually surprised that we're not talking immediately about, what our technology is and what we can do for them. More, it's about who are your patients? Tell us about your patient's journey. Then how can we help with that patient's journey? How can we make a difference? How can we find a way to get them the medicines they need faster? Right. One of Pfizer's main mission statements is time is life. Right. And we bring that to our CDMO practice. Now, people say, well, gosh, Pfizer's relatively new to this game. I would say Pfizer's not relatively new to this game. We've been doing this for almost 50 years. It's more a case of Pfizer's one of the best kept secrets in the industry.
Right.
Right. But we're happy to share everything we know about Pfizer CentreOne with whomever will listen, because we love what we do and we love the patient contribution that we're allowed to make every day here at Pfizer.
There's some brilliant themes in there. I'm always fascinated by these kind of journeys from one career to something that becomes very different. And I think the term you used was, what color is your parachute, right? So moving into a role, I guess, that gave you so much breadth at the outset was obviously a very important step into what you would subsequently go and do. I spent a couple of years living in Singapore myself a few years ago, so I can only imagine that must have been an amazing experience in terms of setting up operations there a few years back.
Well, if you go to TUAS today, back when I was getting started with the Wyeth facility. Well, first of all, when we first saw the Wyeth land that had been designated, we were, the fellow that was showing it to us pointed out to the water and said, "That's where your plant's going to be." right? So Tuas is probably 10 times larger now than it was when I was there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Tom, just looking a bit more at Pfizer CentreOne now, how's 2024 been so far? You know, there's thoughts on extraordinary amount of disruption and change in contract manufacturing this year and in, recent times, high profile acquisitions, regulatory changes. How's the year been so far?
Well, if we look at what's happened, right? So a whole bunch of, and to your point, a whole bunch of disruptions are coming at us or here simultaneously, right? So you've got the delays in clinicals that occurred during COVID, right? The number of products that were deprioritized across the world due to COVID. You had the changes in the EU GMP relative to Annex 1, right? And those changes went into effect last summer. Then this year, the announcement that Novo Holdings was looking to acquire Catalent,
Yeah.
right? And the changes that can introduce to the business line. And then recently, the vote in the United States Senate on the Biosecure Act and the impact that can have on several companies involved in CDMO, right? So a lot of risk has been introduced, not for the CDMOs themselves, but more for innovative pharma, right? So when you look at that, if you're an innovative pharma company going into the clinic, if you're just getting started and haven't done your phase ones yet, you have time to pivot, right? And probably can recover your timelines. If you're in late phase 3, you could probably do a tech transfer and recover your timelines and protect your patient base. If you're in between phase 1 and phase 3, it's really disruptive, or it could be, let me say that, it could be really disruptive. So what we're seeing is a lot of customers coming to us saying, what can you do creatively to help us save the work that we've done and be able to help us maintain or mitigate the impact on our timelines? So we're seeing quite a bit of that, right? And recognizing that time is life, that's really important to us. So, that one of the benefits we have as Pfizer is we tech transfer and launch so many products every single year. And having been in the CDMO space for almost 50 years, we launch and tech transfer so many products over the course of the year. We've got a lot of experience with the ability to pivot. Yeah. Right. And to try and find synergies, try and find time savings, try and find creative ways to approach the science to still meet our obligations to launching a product that is approvable, but getting there in a timely manner. I'd say the other things that are going on is, that's all coupled with the fact that there's a crush of clinicals because of the backlog of clinicals.
Yeah.
And then people are trying to reinforce their supply chains. When we look at COVID, a lot of folks discovered that, and look, everything was just in time was a great concept, is a great concept. But we cut the line so close going into COVID that when a black swan hit, which COVID was the biggest black swan I've ever experienced, that caused a huge disruption in supply chains that just in time became just too late. Yeah. Right. So now as we look at that, we're trying to figure out how do we build robustness in? So we're not only are we doing that on our existing clients' behalf, we're looking for new clients. How do we do that? How we approach that? And they're asking for that information. And we're seeing companies that are out there that are looking at, I've heard the phrase used, reshoring product. I haven't seen reshore, to be very truthful. What I have seen, though, is regionalization, regional diversification. People are trying to make sure that they have redundancy, but doing that from various locations around the world. So if something were to happen in one area, they have another geographic area that they can rely on, right? And that's, I think that's smart business. It's up to us to figure out how to work with that, right? And make sure we see that. But that's That's a lot of what we're seeing right now and reacting to and responding to. But yeah, it's been a fun year. I mean, I would say it's really been a challenge, but these are challenges that we love, right? Because again, we know that there's a patient at the end of every supply chain, and it's just absolutely critical for us to find that pathway for them to get their medicines.
Yeah, one thing's for sure, it's certainly not been a quiet time in the CDMO and outsourcing landscape for sure. You touched, Tom, on some of the challenges when we're talking about 2024. Any other challenges you would know, or indeed any other opportunities you would experience in this landscape?
So we're seeing some changes in the way that in the timing and the way the business decisions are being made for innovative pharma coming through the clinic, right? Typically in CDMO, and going back to 2017, 2018, as late as 2018, what we would see is CDMO selection was done late phase 2. They would make the decision in phase 3. They'd go in, they might do phase 3 clinicals, they might not, but they do registration stability batches and then go for commercial launch, right? Now what we're seeing is decision making is coming post IND or phase 1, right? So it has moved way earlier in the process. And I think some of what's driving this is the way that financing is working, right? So if we go back in time, an innovative pharma company could go out when it was looking for financing and be able to show a timeline that shows commercial launch. And if I'm an investor, I look at that and say, okay, that's where my ROI starts, right? As a manufacturer, I look at that and say that's where the patients start to get their medicine. But both are inherent goods. So what they found was everybody had a PowerPoint deck, right? So then the investors started asking important questions when delays came up and said, okay, what's your regulatory strategy, right? And so they'd look at the regulatory strategy, they'd see the regulatory strategy and how that would tie to the approval date. But then there were delays in the regulatory strategy. So then the investment community started saying, what is your clinical strategy associated with the regulatory strategy, associated with your launch date? And now what we're seeing is, what is your manufacturing strategy, right? And does your manufacturing strategy tick and tie to your clinical strategy? Does that tick and tie to your regulatory strategy? Does that tick and tie to your commercialization date, right? So there's far more analysis going on, and that the change that is giving us is both a challenge and an opportunity. It's working with small startups and mid-sized companies to help them build that manufacturing strategy and make sure that it does tick and tie to their clinical plans, to the regulatory plans, and build a timeline that is based on, they should be optimistic, but they should be based on what is possible. And then where it's really fun for us to bring the Pfizer science into it is, the pathway to approval is not linear. I've never seen a linear pathway to approval. Pfizer has been doing launches forever. We're 175 years old. I mean, we've been doing launches forever. There aren't too many hurdles that we haven't faced before that we don't already have. If we don't have a solution for it, we have a series of mitigating actions that we've done in the past that have been successful and proven, right? So our ability to help people get there is really important. Now, how all that ties back is, this goes to another challenge, and that is that we're seeing instances where the money is allocated by the investors to the innovative pharma company, to the startup or the mid-size, but they're not releasing the tranche of funds until they get specific data. So instead of a huge bolus of money, it's a metering of the money that goes over based on performance over time, right? And that way, if something doesn't succeed, if it gets cold or it has to be reworked, the money can be withheld and put to better purposes, right? So again, we've got to be able to report back the data in a manner that our partner needs, so they can go back for their appropriate funding to move to the next step. Also means that we as a CDMO need to understand what our client partners' cash flow is and work with them to make sure that we are providing them the service that they expect in the sequence with which they can manage it.
Yeah.
Right. So those are some of the things that we're definitely seeing this year that are different. And that coupled with just this desire for light speed, right? And Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, talked about light speed all the way through COVID and through his book Moonshot. But it's the same thing. How do we move faster? How do we get beyond traditional bureaucracy to do the needful and do the needful in the right way, in a manner that meets our quality obligations, and be able to report it out in a way that the regulators can look at the submissions and it makes sense and it helps them understand the benefit of the medicine and that it makes sense for patients.
Thank you. Building it out a little bit, what about key products and services that as a business that you're investing in?
Yeah, so if we look at Pfizer CentreOne over time, right? Pfizer CentreOne, claim to fame really was in small molecule APIs and sterile injectables. 5-6 years ago, we added solid oral dose capabilities to that mix. So what does this mean? This means that we're not a full service CDMO, and we're not. We're a multi-specialist. That's our role. We focus on what Pfizer's really good at, and that's what we offer our clients, right? Yeah. What Pfizer has invested in is what our talent pool, what our capability is. It's not enough just to have capacity, right? Everybody has stainless. But where our capability is, where is our scientific prowess, our engineering prowess, our technological prowess, right? So we added solids several years ago. In the last few years, we've added incrementally to that, right? So we were always quietly in the background in the biologics space as a microbial manufacturer, a microbial DS manufacturer. We are really in deep now on mammalian drug substance. We are very focused on making offerings around our gene therapy capabilities. We are AAV and lenti based on gene therapy, bringing that through. We can do cell therapy in terms of drug substance intermediates, and that's a really exciting space. We offer antibody drug conjugates, and I know that 10 years ago, antibody drug conjugates, there were 300 plus programs, and then it dropped down to like 20 some, right? It had like everybody loved it until it realized how hard it was to make it, and now it's seeing a resurgence. We've been there all along, right? The first antibody drug conjugate that was approved was Mylotarg, which is a Pfizer product out of a Pfizer plant in Pearl River, New York, right? So we're happy to offer that as well. So really, biologics, small molecule API, solid oral dose, and sterile injectable, we're strong in all of those. Now, when we talk about investment, because we share the same work centers and the same packaging lines with all the Pfizer products, those lines have to be maintained at peak compliance. They have to be maintained at absolutely modern and contemporized, because the Pfizer products are on there. So that's what our client partners get the benefit of, right? Pfizer's not going to jeopardize its own products. Therefore, we're not going to jeopardize our client partners' products, right? This is our business. We can't mess up our business. So when we think about that, what does that mean in really robust terms? Pfizer spends over $1 billion a year just on capital to maintain our global network of 38 plants, right? That's $1 billion that's going into those facilities every year. We are contemporary, we are compliant.
Thanks very much indeed. There's some great information there. It makes perfect sense, as you say, focus on what Pfizer is really good at. You did touch on there briefly around capacity as well, and the links there. What capacity does the business have currently? You've talked obviously about that annual investment, et cetera, that goes in. What about the capacity in the business? Any plans to increase that?
So we're always looking at plans to increase, right? So when we do an increase, Pfizer does it based on Pfizer need. And then we, as Pfizer CentreOne, We'll contribute a business case to that, whether or not we think there is a viable CDMO business there as well, right? So if there's the ability to contribute more to Pfizer through a broader investment, then if the business case makes sense, that's how we move forward. But when you talk about capacity, that's an interesting question, because that is actually one of the challenges that many potential client partners bring to us, right? And I talked about the fact that we share work centers, we share analytical centers, et cetera. If I'm a client partner and I look at that, I say, how do I know I'm not going to get deprioritized, right? Pfizer has a home run with one of their products, and I'm going to be out in the cold with no notice. And it's actually not how Pfizer does business, right? Okay, first of all, there's a patient at the end of everything we do, right? So we are very patient-centric when it comes to doing things, but being very practical about this. Right. So Pfizer has a capacity management tool that goes down to the work center level. And we have a 10-year utilization outlook. So when we work on a program, right, when we calculate out our capacity plans and utilization, we will start with Pfizer inline commercial products and put the upside forecast against the work centers that are required, right, to consume capacity. Then we'll take the Pfizer pipeline and put the upside forecast against the utilization there. Then we take Pfizer CentreOne inline products and put the utilization there, upside. And then we'll take the Pfizer CentreOne pipeline products and put it in there. So we make sure that we've accounted for everything. Now, where my business rules are different, perhaps, than many of the pure play CDMOs, we are by policy not allowed to oversell our capacity. We would rather see capacity go underutilized than a patient go without its medicine. That's what patient centricity means when it comes to capacity management. So we don't oversell. We don't even come close to overselling. And when we do our capacity modeling, we do everything based on demonstrated performance, not on theoretical performance. So that's how we protect our client partners. The other thing we do is, let's say something really unusual happens, a black swan, I love that term, but a black swan event occurs, right? So we had a plant in North Carolina that was struck by a tornado. It was all over the press, a year ago. Very, very lucky that nobody was killed or injured when that happened. But many folks saw the pictures in Fierce Farm and other places of our warehouse being, literally the roof ripped off and entire sections of the warehouse just damaged. We have an agnostic process within Pfizer called demand supply alignment, DSA. What this is it's a non-commercial group in Pfizer whose job is to assess a capacity constrained area and make sure that we are servicing the patients out of that area. It's a patient-centric process. So what we do is we set priorities, and the priorities are set by medically necessary products with no alternatives, medically necessary with alternatives, medically significant no alternatives, medically significant with alternatives, ABC. So if you're a supply chain guy, that all makes sense to you. It makes sense to me. What we'll do is we will work with our client partners to understand their supply positions. We will then mask that information, feed that into the system. The Pfizer commercial teams and the manufacturing division have to do the same thing for the Pfizer products. They feed that information in, blinded, and then everything is based on patient need. And this agnostic group actually reports up into the business information office, so that commercial on Pfizer, PC1, the manufacturing division, the R&D division, none of us can have an undue influence on that decision-making process. That decision-making process is based strictly on patient need. And it worked. We were able to work through the disaster that was that tornado in a way that mitigated to the greatest extent possible any patient impact as a result. It's not easy. It's hard decisions, but hard decisions are a lot easier when you use a patient as your North Star.
Shifting focus a little bit to your customers, who are the ideal customers for Pfizer CentreOne to be working with? Is that based on a particular phase of development or manufacturing or location or specialism, or is it a bit of all of those? What does that look like?
No, wow, thank you for asking that, Chris, because it's funny how many people have, whenever I talk to folks, and both folks in Pfizer and in the industry, they've got preconceived notions about who we work the most with, and generally it's 180 degrees different, right? So most people think a multinational would work with a multinational, right? And that's where the best synergies are. That's where the best symbiosis takes place. That's actually they don't benefit from Pfizer science the way that others would, right? And it's not that we don't like working with multinationals. No, they're great to work with but they bring their own science to the table, right? So they generally don't have the dependence on us to help them get where they need to go. So where we can bring the most value to client partners and their patients is the small biotechs or the regional companies, right? So small biotechs, many cases, they don't have the expertise. They need the expertise. They need the advisory capabilities that we can offer, the consulting capabilities that we can offer, and one of the things that's really cool about being able to work in Pfizer CentreOne, being trusted by my leadership to work in Pfizer CentreOne, is we're able to bring the various disciplines within Pfizer, the various capabilities within Pfizer, and introduce them to our client partners, especially these small biotechs, to help them think about their journey, to help them think about how they're going to get there. That's what we think about when we say unleashing the science of Pfizer, unleashing the power of Pfizer on behalf of our clients. Those are the folks that we can benefit the most. Then when we look at regionals, right? So you have regional players with regional products, regional players with global products. We are a global company, right? We maintain active registrations in over 180 countries around the world. So it's, when a regional player wants to go bigger, they want to get into other domiciles, we have that experience. We can bring that experience to bear for them, and what's great about them is they bring us such cool science. So when you take their technology team and our technology team and put them together on like continuous improvement programs, it moves beyond algebra to quantum math, right? 1 + 1 then starts to equal something more than 2. It's the same thing in quality. 1 + 1 equals more than 2. With regulatory, 1 + 1 equals more than 2. It's really amazing when you see that come together. So that's where we bring a lot of value, right? And it's also about how you think about manufacturing. Now, again, I am an old knuckle dragging troglodyte. I'm a manufacturing guy from all the way back, right? Actually, so far back that I started in coding, and when I learned coding, I learned how to ladle on coding solutions by the sound of the pan, right? That's how long ago I started. But in all seriousness, the manufacturing, I think, really comes down to three prongs, right? So it's your cost, your value, it's your customer service, your supply reliability, and it's your quality systems, right? So cost, quality, customer service. That's what we can bring as Pfizer. We've really got a good balance on that three-legged stool of cost, quality, customer service, and everything that's related to that. So what we'll look at is, I'll give you an example. Right? So a potential client partner might bring us a request for proposal, right? And this is what we want you to request. Now we'll do that, right? We'll take that RFP and we will quote that RFP. Absolutely, we'll quote exactly what you asked for. But then we also, right at the start of that relationship, we're looking at, okay, are there things that we see that jump out at us that we could either improve their quality position, that we can improve their supply reliability, whether it's increasing yields and titers, whether it's reducing lead times, et cetera, or that could we accelerate their time to commercialization or their time to market, right? So we will put that in the RFP as well as we see this opportunity, we see this opportunity, we see this opportunity. We want to get to that conversation with the people because it's not just what you want today, but where do you want to go with your product? Right? Where do you've got a medicine that's going to make a difference in somebody's life, or a lot of people's lives. How can we help you do even more with that? And those are the folks that are our ideal customer.
Great to understand more on that. Thank you. How are you at Pfizer CentreOne supporting this drive to sustainability, and how are your plans for reducing your customers' carbon footprint?
Pfizer has been on a green journey for a very long time. We are global citizens, and especially when you think about where our facilities are, whether it's a manufacturing facility or a farm side development facility, the people that work there live in that community, right? So there is an underlying drive for us to husband our resources appropriately. So to that end, right, we are committed to zero carbon emissions, aggregated zero carbon emissions by prior to 2040, right? So that's something that we're absolutely looking at. We are doing everything we can about energy reduction. So we do that with contemporary investments on equipment today. It's like buying a refrigerator, right? You buy a 20-year-old used refrigerator, it's going to use 5x the energy that a brand new refrigerator uses today, right? We look at equipment that same way, right? Can we find equipment that is more efficient? Can we find equipment that just runs better, delivers what we need, but does it on a better basis, right? Can we get to water reduction, right? How can we reduce the amount of water that we add into our processes, the amount of water that it takes to get equipment demonstrably clean, to be able to move product to product or batch to batch? How does that translate into wastewater? How can we get the wastewater reduction? How can we properly treat our waste? How can we handle our waste streams? Absolutely committed to all this. We're doing it for Pfizer products. We're doing it for our customers get the benefit of that. Even more so, we do look upstream, and we're understanding what the upstream questions are. So when we look at materials that we have to provide on behalf of our client partners, those are the same suppliers that we use for Pfizer, which means they've gone through the Pfizer procurement and quality and environmental health and safety standards and audits to make sure that they also are good global citizens. And then when we talk to our client partners, again, we're happy to share with them details around what we're doing on our green journey, specifics about how their product would how we can mitigate the impact of their product as it goes through the manufacturing and packaging process, right? Where is there a direct correlation to our actions to their product?
Yeah.
And whether it's just our windmills and our sun farms, or it's water reduction, right? We're trying to make sure that they understand all of it. And then again, when we talk about the RFPs that come through, or when a client partner's in with us, how can we perform continuous improvement in a way that helps reduce their energy consumption, reduce their water consumption, or reduce their waste stream?
Thank you. There's a lot going on there for sure. What's one market trend that our listeners should be aware of, have front of mind as we move toward the second half of this year and into 2025?
So when it comes to the CDMO space, the one trend that's always been there, whether acknowledged or not, is there today, will be there tomorrow. It doesn't change. It's when you are picking a CDMO, you're picking a marriage partner, right? It is so complex to move off of an existing relationship, particularly if you're moving through the approval process. But even once you've gotten to approval and commercialization, right, there's a degree of stickiness there. It's not inexpensive to have to move somewhere else. So my advice to folks on both sides of the table, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, think about your journey together, right? As you go through the initial exploration period, you're kind of dating, right? When you get to the RFP and looking at due diligence and quality audits, you're seriously dating. When you move into contract negotiation, you're engaged. And when you sign that contract, right, you make that commitment, folks, you're married, right? So you've got to make sure that you've thought about all the things that go into a good marriage, right? Do you have the same set of underlying values? Do you look at the world the same way? Do you have the same objectives? Can you bring your cultures together, right? Can you bring, and when you think about cultures coming together, do you look at quality and quality systems the same way? Do you look at environmental systems the same way? Do you look at health and safety the same way? Do you look at regulatory filings the same way? Do you look at regulatory audits the same way, right? Those are all underlying things because you're going to get married. You're going to have this product that's coming out, this medicine for patients. That's your child. Can you raise that child together properly, right? That to me, that was true in the past. It's true today. It's true tomorrow, right? Treat every one of these selection criteria, every one of these relationships as a good marriage, knowing that you're going to have children together, and make sure that you're doing the best you can to put those children in the best position for success. And yes, I'm probably driving my legal and marketing teams crazy right now with that analogy, but I use this all the time because I believe so strongly.
But it's also very interesting that in a world that's changing so quickly, so many differing dynamics, that actually the most, or a absolutely key trend, is one that's been similar and the same for many years. The proximity of that relationship, how important that is. So it's a really powerful lesson. What advice would you give to biotechs or pharma companies when partnering with a CDMO? Are there common problems that you see? Are there consistent solutions? How would you go about fixing some of those issues? What advice would you give to people on the other side?
The challenges always come back to the same issue, and that's misaligned expectations. So I think that the really important factor is to share expectations up front. So if I'm on the buy side, I want to make sure that the CDMOs that I'm talking to, and eventually the CDMO that I select, understands my expectations. But at the same time, and this is my Stephen Covey coming through, do I understand their expectations? Do both parties come to the table trying to seek first to understand and then be understood, right? If both sides are really clear that they know what's important to each other, then they can find that Venn diagram. They can find that path forward, right? To be successful. And given that we're in a very global industry right now, and hopefully forevermore, it's not just enough that you're using the language of your specific country or company, but you've got to make sure that you're using a common language and that you understand what the other party is telling you, whether you're doing that in English, in French, in German, in Mandarin. It doesn't matter. You just got to make sure that both sides really are clear up front, part of the way that we've addressed this in Pfizer CentreOne is we've gone out of our way to build the team to have a balanced way of looking at the world. So we use Herman Brain as a diagnostic tool to understand where people's approach to problem solving comes from, where their approach to relationship building comes from. And we make sure that when you look at the Herman Brain wheel of strengths, that we are balanced in our team across that wheel of strengths. So we look at people's underlying psychology, right? Making sure that we've got balance there. Then we look at people's technological skill sets and experience sets and make sure we have balance there. And that's what we try and bring to the table to talk to customers, so that together we can find a way, there's at least one person on the team that hears what the customer is really saying to us, is really trying to communicate to us, and making sure that we capture that appropriately so that we can then meet their expectations. But that's really it. It's how do you get to clarity between both sides on expectations? And that's the path forward, right? Because expectations are very rarely at loggerheads. There's almost always a Venn diagram. I'm a deal maker by heart, right? I believe there's always a deal to be made. It's a fair deal, right? So it's how do we find that pathway to that fair deal for everybody that creates a fantastic outcome.
Thank you, Tom. That's a great way to finish. Sadly, that is all we have time for on the PharmaSource podcast today. Tom, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you today. Thanks very much for your insight. And of course, thanks for your support for CDMO Live on the 13th of June. And we look forward to hearing more from you, more from Pfizer CentreOne on the day. Tom, thanks ever so much.
Thanks, Chris. Looking forward next time we chat.
Join us at CDMO Live on June the 13th. All you need to do to register is head to pharmasource.global/CDMO Live. We look forward to seeing you there.